press the record button. Awesome. Well,
got it.
Welcome to the first online training session as part of the Women's Snowkite Camp. I'm super excited to be going snowkiting with you all next week. My name is Jenny Milton. For those of you who don't know me, they call me Adrenogen because I'm into adrenaline-based sports. I've been into kiteboarding and snowkiting for 20 years now. It's amazing. I turn 52 soon, so I've got a wealth of knowledge to share with you guys, and one of my biggest passion is sharing my knowledge with other women, because when I started in this sport, I was nervous. I didn't quite know how to get into the sport. It was dangerous, and it took me a really long time. These days, we can learn a lot faster by learning from someone like myself and learning from the fantastic coaches that we've got coming to our Snowkite camp. I'm excited to have Sensi Graves joining us again. Colleen Carroll is coming back this year, even after being a new mum. Colleen's in the room. Hi, Colleen. And we've got Darcy Gray joining us also from Bellingham. Some of you are from there. And I've also got Heidi Ettlinger joining us, and she is like this superstar in the ski instructor world as well. So she's going to have some great tips for any of us who, maybe need a few tips on our ski or snowboard skills as well. And so next Friday, we are all going to be meeting in Island Park for our 3 days of snowkiting, which is fantastic. So today what I thought I would do is do a presentation on what to wear, what to bring to our camp, and also how to pack. Some of you are driving, some of you are coming on planes, and it can be a little tricky, figuring all that type of thing out. So hopefully I've got some great tips for you today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen now and jump into my presentation here. Can you guys all see that?
Yep.
That's all good. And I'm also just going to ask everybody if it's okay if you could just turn off your microphones. And I'm just going to bring myself down the bottom here. Okay, so I have put together an extensive snowkite packing list for you for what to wear and bring when going on a snowkite adventure. You can see a picture of me here. This is where I snowkite in Australia. Yes, we do have snow in Australia, and it is outside one of the ski resorts. So we have to actually catch a chairlift up, then a T-bar, then we have to put our hiking gear on, and we nearly need to hike half an hour to an hour to our launch spot. And sometimes we don't know what size kites we're going to need. And so you can see there, I've got a big heavy load on my back. I'm not just carrying my own kites, I'm actually carrying a couple of spares for my students. Plus I'm carrying all my first aid gear and everything that I'm going to need out there in the backcountry in case of emergency. When we are snowkiting, we are outside of ski resorts, so we haven't got ski patrol there to come and rescue us. We need to be ready to rescue ourselves and to rescue our friends. So today I'm going to be going over, what we're going to wear on our body, all our clothing. I'm going to talk about all of our hardware, our skis, snowboards, boots, bindings, that sort of thing. I'm going to talk about what to put in our backpack in terms of safety gear. And I'm going to talk about what kite gear we want to bring. And the last thing I'm going to do for you today is I'm going to show you a quick little video of me packing for a snowkite trip to give you a few tips on how to pack your kite gear. So when we're planning a snowkite adventure, we need to get ready. And the first thing we do is we want to dream and visualize of this amazing location that we want to go to. Right now, we're all dreaming of going to Island Park in Idaho, which is a fantastic snowkite location. We want to visualize what sort of weather we want. I want powder snow, sun, and moderate winds. What sort of conditions we're going to get. What sort of kiting are we going to be doing? Are we planning on practicing some tricks? What tricks are we going to land? Visualizing our dream trip is an important part of planning our trip, and it's where we can manifest what we want to happen. And I'm a big one for manifesting wind and perfect conditions for all of our kite trips. And most of the time, the wind is my best friend. So my best friend likes coming on kite trips with me, and Mother Nature loves coming to women's camps. So we've been very lucky in the past, and I'd love you all to start manifesting the conditions that we want for our weekend next week. Next things we want to do is we want to start our planning and logistics and getting psyched by checking the maps of the area, trying to figure out where are the kite spots that we're going to be going. I know some of you are going to be staying on after the camp for a week and checking out some of the kite spots around. So this is where we check our maps. We do our forecasting, and we find any videos that are going to help us get psyched for our trip. Tomorrow night, I'm going to be going over in detail how I do my forecasting for Snowkite trips, and we'll cover forecasting, locations, observations, and wind tomorrow night. We want to get fit and stay fit. I see a lot of people plan trips, especially up in Alaska. People go up there to go heli skiing, and unfortunately they get up there and they maybe don't have the fitness to ski the big runs or to have the long days in the mountains. So getting fit and staying fit if you're a kiter is so important. Doing some, strength and mobility exercises. I have just been lucky enough to be working with a fantastic personal trainer in Australia, and he has put together a kite fitness program for me. I was starting to struggle with a few little niggling injuries, and I went to see this personal trainer, and he said, "Oh wow, Jen, you're super strong in a lot of your kite muscles, but there's also a lot of muscles that the opposing muscles are not getting worked." And so he came up with this amazing program for me, and I'm now offering that to all my students as well. And then we also need to boost our confidence. When we're going on a kite trip, we've never been there before. We might be pushing ourselves, out of our comfort zone a little bit. So boosting confidence. Find your superpowers. Sensi Graves is one of our coaches, as I mentioned, and on Friday night she's going to be doing a kite confidence talk for us, which is going to be amazing. And I recommend, jumping on her website and checking out some of the great tips she's got for, building confidence, building your self-esteem, and finding your superpowers. So here is my first slide, and there is a lot of stuff there. So I don't want you to get too overwhelmed. You don't have to have everything. This is an extensive Snowkite packing list. If you were going on a snowkiting trip to Alaska or Greenland or Iceland or wherever you're going, there might be certain things that you need for some locations and not for others. We're going to Island Park next week. It can be really cold there, which is actually a great thing because it keeps the snow in good conditions. So there's benefits of the cold too, Tina. Don't you worry, it's going to be great. But most of the time we get to actually park on the side of the road and we get to kite from there. And so having touring gear isn't as important. We're not going to be in avalanche terrain. So again, a lot of our avalanche safety gear isn't quite as important at that location. But I want to go through everything with you because I know some of you have got other trips planned, and it's important to know everything on the list. So let's go through clothing first. Wearing the right clothing for snow kiting is important to stay warm and dry, but it's also important that we can vent and remove layers for reducing our body temperature when we get too hot. One of the biggest mistakes people can make is, wearing too many layers and then starting to get hot and sweaty underneath, and then we actually get wet from the inside, and then we get cold. Which can be a problem if somebody hurts themselves. We don't want them, wearing wet, sweaty clothing. So having a wind and waterproof breathable jacket with a hood. We've all heard of windproofing, but windproofing is so important for snow kiting. So having that breathable shell jacket is fantastic. Having a hood is great to put over our helmet to stop the wind going down the back of our necks, because we do have the wind at our back quite a lot. And having a jacket that maybe has under, pit zips in the arms is a good thing to have. Again, having some waterproof breathable pants is a great idea. I wear shell jackets and shell pants. You know, if you go into the ski shop, they're going to sell some that are insulated, that have insulation inside them. And then they're going to sell shells, which is just that outer layer. A lot of people go, oh, well, the shells, they're not very warm. I need the insulated ones. But you can add layers underneath. Right? You can add as many layers as you want underneath to add that insulation. And that's the method that I prefer, so that I can adjust my layers depending on the temperature of the day. Having snow cuffs at the bottom of the pants are a good idea. A snow cuff is that elastic piece that goes over the top of your snow boot, your snowboard boots or your ski boots, to stop the snow going into your boots, because the last thing we want is snow getting in and us getting wet feet. The other thing which is important to have is a puffy down jacket to wear. And there's sort of two trains of thought. I have this discussion quite often with people. Do we wear our puffies under our shells or over our shells? Any ideas? Well, under, a lot of people say under. Yeah, especially in Australia, everybody wears their puffies under their waterproof shell, because if it's raining or if it's wet, our puffies don't do well in that wet weather. But if we're in cold weather, we haven't got an issue with rain. We don't really have an issue with our puffies getting wet. So having a puffy that's a little bit oversized that you can put over your shell jacket is a fantastic layering system. It's very, very popular in North America. Up in Alaska, nearly everybody's wearing their puffies over their jacket. And the reason for that is that we can have our shell jacket on, we can then have our harness over the top even, and then we can put the puffy over the top, because we might be cold when we're getting ready, we're setting up our kite, we're hanging around at our base camp there, it's quite cold. Once we launch our kite and we start kiting, we're going to heat up. So it's nice just to pull your puffy off the top, and then you've got your shell and you've got your reduced layers on now. If you're wearing your puffy under your shell, you've now got to take your harness off, your shell off, the jacket off. You've now lost all of your temperature, and you've now got to put all your jackets back on again. There's a lot more changing clothing if you're having to change your layers that are underneath. So having layers on top has worked really, really well for me over the years, and that is the system that I still stick with today, unless it's raining. Thermal underwear that wicks away the moisture is super important. I find that, you know, I teach a lot of kite surfers to Snowkite, and a high percentage of them turn up with a cotton t-shirt and a cotton hoodie. We've all got our ozone t-shirts on, and we've got our groovy gear that we wear to the beach, but that's not really suitable for when we're going into a cold environment. As you all know, when we do our washing, what's the last thing to dry when we put our stuff through the dryer? Cotton, right? Yeah, cotton t-shirts, they take so long to dry. So if we had cotton against our skin and we got hot and sweaty, that cotton would get wet, and it is not going to dry on its own. It's not going to dry until you take it off in your hotel room. So it's important, as I mentioned, to have something like a Polartec or you know, a fabric that is going to dry very, very quickly. A lot of people like merino wool and bamboo. I think those are fantastic products, but just be aware, if you're a bit of a hot-bodied person like myself, must be my age, I'm getting a few hot flushes and things, and I tend to overheat very easily. I don't like wearing the merino against my skin, because again, it's going to get wet. We want to have a warm, breathable mid layer, and this is a great time to have merino to go over your you know, your base layer. You can have fleece, merino, a bunch of different things. Snowboard socks and ski socks, again, they're a great product to have in merino or bamboo, because merino is a product that when it does get wet, it does stay warm. So if our feet do get hot and sweaty and we've got merino socks on, they do still stay warm. A lot of people, if they're not regular skiers and snowboarders, tend to think, oh, sock's a sock. You know, we can just wear a hiking sock, wear whatever sock we want. And they go into a ski shop and they go, oh my God, ski socks are $50, $60. In Australia, they're $100 for a pair of socks. And people are trying to justify why they would spend $100 on a pair of socks. The reason is because a lot of the really good socks are compression garments. which works well for helping the blood flow and keeping your feet warm. They also have some really technical fabrics in them, the merinos, the bamboo. And the ski socks are designed to have extra padding on the shin. They've got elastic around the arch and the ankle so you don't get any creases inside your boots. You know, the last thing we want to do is have sore feet when we're out there skiing or snow kiting, and having good socks can fix a whole bunch of, you know, boot problems. Waterproof breathable outer mitts or gloves like these ones over here, the khaki ones. Having some big mitts. I've got mine here. I'm using these OR mitts. These are fantastic. They're waterproof, they're windproof, and they've got enough room that then you can wear like a Polartec glove liner underneath. And for snow kiters, this is one of the best tips I can give you, is making sure that you've got, you know, 2 layers on your hands, so that if we've got to do up our knots for our kite lines and we're dealing with our bridles, you can't do it with mitts on or big gloves on. It's nearly impossible. But we also don't want to have bare hands. If it's really cold, you could get frostbite on your fingers. And sometimes if your hands do get cold, it's really hard to warm them up. So having some, you know, good Polartec glove liners are key. I would, you know, spend the money on those over nearly anything. And just making sure they fit under your gloves or outer mitts. Goggles. Having goggles is essential. You know, one of the reasons why we wear goggles is to protect our eyes from ultraviolet, but the other reason we wear the goggles is to protect our eyes from the wind. And of course, we're going to be out there in windy conditions. So a lot of people say, oh, can't I just wear sunglasses? Well, sunglasses will protect you from the UV, but they won't protect you from the wind. And once the wind starts blowing behind the sunglasses, your eyes can start to water and dry out and things like that. So goggles is important. And ultimately, the ultimate would be to have 2 lenses, to have a lens for sunny conditions and also to have like a yellow lens for low light if it is stormy and low visibility. Ski and snowboard helmet, essential, mandatory. We shouldn't be skiing, snowboarding or snow kiting without a helmet. Plus they're super nice and warm, comfortable to wear. You can even hook them up with music. Also, while we're talking about our heads, having a balaclava or a neck tube, some sort of face protection is really important. Again, if it's cold conditions, we want to make sure we've got no bare skin showing. So having our goggles here and then having our face mask, you know, tucked under our goggles, we can actually have no skin showing at all. So make sure you bring a neck tube, that blue one at the top of the picture there. Darcy, one of our coaches, she's an artist, and this company, Avalon 7, actually commissioned her to put her artwork on those, and I'm sure she'll have a few for sale on the weekend as well. And don't forget your sunglasses and your sunscreen. And down the bottom there, having spare gloves and spare goggles can be an advantage just in case your gloves get wet or your goggles fog up or you have a crash and your goggles get full of snow and you can't see through them anymore. So consider having spares if possible. Let's talk about ski and snowboard gear. I know there's a bunch of you are skiers. I'm a skier. I know a few of you are snowboarders. Who's a snowboarder? Put up your hand if you're a snowboarder. Sensi and Colleen are both on snowboard. Darcy, Heidi and I are all on skis. So you've got a combination of coaches for both skis and snowboard. We pretty much want to use the same gear as we would for backcountry touring. So skiers, you know, the ultimate is to have a backcountry setup with touring bindings on them and skins. And snowboarders could possibly use a split board or have snowshoes for ease of uphill travel. And the reason why I'm talking about all this touring gear is because snow kiting, we can cover a lot of ground really fast. Okay, and so what if we go, you know, a mile away or so from the road and the wind dies and our kite goes down? We're going to have to walk home, right? And that can be really tricky if it's deep snow. So if you've got touring gear and you've got the gear in your backpack, that just gives you a way of self-rescuing. right, that you can get yourself home. At the island park, you know, location, we are going to stay close to the road at first until everybody's, you know, confident, and we're in a big group, so there's going to be people to tow you back if you had an issue with your kite or things like that. But if you're coming to Alaska, or if you're coming snow kiting in Australia with me, you would need to turn up with all of that touring gear. Making sure you've also got any tools needed, you know, for snowboarders. Make sure you've got the tool needed for adjusting your binding. And snowboarders, see if you can adjust your bindings before you come on camp to be centered, so you've got the same amount of tip to tail on your snowboard. A lot of people, if they're snowboarding in, you know, deep powdery resorts, will have their bindings set back with more nose, but we're going to ride our snowboard pretty much like a twin tip. So we want to have our binding centered on the snowboard, and make sure you've got your tools needed if you needed to adjust anything. Another reminder, awesome ski and snowboard socks. Ski poles. Having some ski poles, again, is not an essential piece of equipment, but it can be essential if you have to hike back a long way. So having some ski poles, I've got some that fold into 3 pieces and they fit in my backpack. That means no matter where I am, I've always got some poles with me. If you're a snowboarder, having some snowshoes, like those red ones up in the corner. If you're not sure what snowshoes are, they're kind of like big tennis rackets that go on the bottom of your snowboard boots, so that if it's deep snow, you don't sink through. Or quite a few you know, snow kiters actually use split boards, and a split board is where your snowboard splits in half and turns into skis, and then you also have skins to go on the bottom of them for uphill travel. Having you know, a couple of ski straps like that orange one in the picture there. Ski straps are super handy, not just for skis, but they're a great tool that we can use, you know, if we're MacGyvering some first aid, or we've got to fix some equipment out in the field. Ski straps are super handy, as well as zip ties, things like that. I mentioned skins. Skins are used to go on the bottom of your skis or the bottom of your split board for going uphill. Put up your hand if you've actually done any skinning before. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? When yeah, excellent. Tina's shaking her head. No, that's okay, Tina. You've got you know, lots to be excited about learning when you're out there on the weekend, and I'll have my skins there that I can show you, but it's not something that you're going to need to bring for the weekend. Wax. Important to wax our skis and boards before you come. So if you've got time, you know, take them down to a store, or maybe some of you like to do it yourselves, and get your gear waxed. Now, Island Park, I mentioned, is a cold location. So normally I'm going to wax, say, blue wax for that particular location. And I might even bring some, you know, rub-on wax with me if I'm going on a snow kite trip, so that you know, I can re-wax in the morning. Snow kiters cover a lot of ground. We can go miles and miles and miles and miles in a day, and you're going to wear your wax off a lot faster than a skier in resorts. So carrying some wax on a snow kite trip is going to be handy. Ski boots. If you can have ski boots that have a walk mode on them. So if any of you are renting boots, see if they have an option of having a ski boot with a walk mode. It means that when we're walking around, walking our lines, setting up our kites and our gear, we can have our boots in walk mode, which makes them a lot more comfortable. And then you'll lock them down into ski mode when you're ready to kite. Snowboards and bindings, snowboard boots and good socks. Did I say good socks? And then I mentioned carrying the rub-on wax as well, for that in warm conditions. Okay, the next list that I've got is what we're going to put in our backpacks. So backcountry safety gear should be carried in a big backpack with a waist and chest strap for ease of travel, and kite backpacks are not always suitable. I know I fly ozone kites, and the backpacks that come with my inflatable water kites, they don't have a waist strap, they don't have a chest strap, and there's no straps on the side for attaching my skis to. So kite backpacks are not always suitable for snow kiting. But for our trip to Island Park, they're going to be fine if that's what you've got. But if you're going to go on a big trip, think about purchasing a specific backpack, like the blue one in the picture there. That's a specific snow kiting pack that Ozone make. And you can see there's straps on the outside for attaching skis. There's straps that go across the front for attaching a snowboard. It's got a waist and a chest strap. And the reason why we want the waist and the chest strap is that if your pack is heavy, like you saw me wearing in that first picture, if you don't have those straps holding it on, if you bend over or do anything, the pack just moves and slides around. So you want to make sure your pack is done up nice and tight on your body so that it's not rocking around. In our backpack, we also want to make sure we've got our toolkit, our wax, scraper, tape, zip ties, hand warmers, anything that we could use in a MacGyver situation if we've got damaged gear, or in an emergency if somebody gets hurt. In our backpack, that's where we're going to put our skins for uphill travel. We're going to have our shovel, probe, and beacon as well. Now, I mentioned before, we're not going to actually be in avalanche terrain for our Island Park trip, but does that mean we shouldn't have a shovel, probe, and beacon with us? I always have a shovel, probe, and beacon with me. A shovel, an avalanche shovel, like the one at the top of the picture here with the blue blade and orange handle, they're extendable. They're nice and lightweight, and they're going to fit in your backpack. We use them a lot as snow kiters. I mean, that's one of the first things I pull out of my pack is I'm going to pull out my shovel. I'm going to shovel snow on top of my kite to hold it in place. I'm going to stick my shovel in the ground, and I'm going to hook my bridle over the top of it to anchor my kite. I would use the shovel to build a snow wall if we needed to stay warm in a storm. A shovel is a fantastic thing, and it's definitely should be on the high priority list for you. I'm going to have a few spares with me because I know everybody doesn't have an avalanche shovel, but if that's something you can borrow or rent, it would be a great thing to have and to start using and start practicing. A probe is a piece of equipment that extends out like a big tent pole, and they are designed for actually probing down into the snow after an avalanche to find a person or to find a body. But snow kiters, we use probes a lot. I actually use my probe as a flagpole as well, so we definitely get our money's worth out of the avalanche safety gear, because I'm going to pull out my probe every day and put a windsock on that and have that out in the field. So if anybody's got a probe, please bring it along, because if we get stormy conditions, we can actually put a probe line around with some flagging on it to keep us safe and keep us in an area so we don't get lost. A beacon is a piece of equipment that sends out a signal so that if we were caught in an avalanche, our friends who also had beacons, they would switch their beacon to receive mode and they would be able to find us. Okay, so we wear the beacon for two reasons. One, in case we're caught in an avalanche and being rescued, and the other one is to rescue our friends. So it's really important if we were snow kiting in avalanche terrain, which I do up in Alaska, if you come snow kiting with me up there, it's really important to make sure that you and all your friends know how to use your beacon, especially your friends know how to use them because they might be rescuing you. A lot of snow kiters say to me, Jenny, we don't need to wear beacons. We're just snow kiting around on the flats. But what if somebody was skiing on the mountain, next to us and they got caught in an avalanche? How bad would we feel if we didn't have our own beacons on to go and rescue that person? So I tend to say wear a beacon if you've got one, but you don't actually need one for our women's snow kite camp. Emergency communication device, a spot or an inReach, or an EPIRB. These are little pieces of equipment you can have in your backpack to use in an emergency. If someone, was in a life or death situation, or even if somebody had broken a leg and, us girls, we're not strong enough to actually get them out of the field with their broken leg, we need to be able to contact emergency services. If we've got phone communication, fantastic. We can ring 911 and get emergency help very quickly. But what if we have no phone reception? It's important to have another device. And so I'll be carrying an EPIRB. If anybody's got one of those, fantastic. But it's something to think about after our camp. If you're going out there and you're snow kiting around, there's not many people around, you might not be able to be seen from the road. Anything we can do for emergency communication is important. Walkie-talkie radios. This is something that's great to have between our friends. And if anyone's got a walkie-talkie, please bring it to our camp. That's going to be very handy. We can all talk to each other very, very easily without having to pull our phones out. I mentioned bringing ski poles, and you're going to put them in your pack. Having your backpack being able to carry skis or snowboard is important, especially if you don't have skins. It's nice to be able to put your gear in your pack and then walk. Food, water, thermos for hot water. You carry your rub-on wax in there, your camera, your phone, spare batteries or pocket power. Our phones can die very, very quickly in cold conditions. And if you're carrying your phone for, emergency communication and the battery dies, you're in trouble. So having pocket power or having another mode of communication, like I mentioned, is important. My little trick for you though is to get a hand warmer and put it in the same pocket as your phone. That's going to keep your phone a lot warmer. You can even tape the hand warmer to the back of your phone, so it's right against the battery there, and you'll find that your phone battery lasts a lot longer. Having a GPS, compass, or maps of the area, again, is also a great safety tool. Okay, so the last list is our kite gear. So what kite gear are we going to bring with us? We need to choose our kite size based on the forecast and the sensor readings at the time. And my rule is always bring 2 kites. Don't make your decision at the hotel room or at the house and, oh, I only need to bring a 12. It's only blowing 12 meter, because if the wind picks up or conditions change, you might need a second kite. And the other thing is, if I'm going to hike out to my launch area and it's quite an effort to get there, I don't want to get there and not have the right size kite. That can be dangerous. You might just fly that kite because that's all you've got with you, but in fact it's too big and you might be overpowered and it can be dangerous. So it's always good to carry two kites. Snow kiting is not a lazy woman's sport. We need to sort of be ready to carry some gear, be ready to have some energy to get home.
Okay.
There was another spot on there that
it
was like that when we left. I don't know. It happens. The rim is almost
I'm just
the rim isn't replaced.
Yeah.
But the only way to get that replaced is go to the end.
Yeah.
just give me a second. I'm just going to mute whoever's
Just give you.
Yeah, I think it's going to be hit and miss.
Technically, because we don't.
sorry. I'm not.
Hey,
There we go.
Maureen, can you mute?
Maureen. There we go.
Sorry about that.
There we go. Yeah, no problem, Maureen. I do that all the time. Okay, so let's get back to our kite gear. We can use foil or inflatable kites. They're both great for snow kiting. So no matter what types of kites you've got, they're going to work. And I want everybody to bring their own kite gear, because this is your chance to have Colleen, Sensi, Heidi and I look at your kites, help you just make sure that they're tuned correctly. And we might actually want to tune our kites differently for snow kiting than how you've got them tuned for the water. You might have them tuned for doing freestyle and having them very responsive and very poppy. And on the first day when we're snow kiting, we just might want to have them a little friendlier, have them, a little slower turning, or depower them slightly. So bring all your kite gear, and we're going to go through all of that. I'm going to have quivers of both inflatables and foil kites with me. So everybody's going to have the chance to try a foil if they've never tried one before, or if you don't have your own kites, I'm going to have lots of brand new model kites for you to choose from. Extra large kites, 14 to 20 meter kites. I know some of you have big kites. It's a good idea to bring them. If we do have light winds, the other thing to think about is that we're going to be at altitude. Now, most of us live at sea level or close to sea level, but when we go up to higher altitude, the air is thinner, and therefore we actually need a bigger kite for the same amount of wind. So having big kites is a great thing for snow kiting. I'll have a 14, a couple of 12s with me, plus some extensions if we need them. Large kites, 11 to 13 meter, small, medium kites, 7 to 10 meter, and small kites for learning or high winds, 4 to 6 meter. Last year we did have some high winds, and all the girls were flying their 5 meters, and we even had to shorten our lines for some of the ladies to you know, bring the power down, and I'll talk more about that during the camp. I'm going to have some trainer kites there. I know there's a couple of beginner kiters in our groups, and if you want to start out with a trainer kite just to refresh your kite skills, that's great. And then we can move you up to the bigger 4-line kites quite quickly. Bars and lines to suit your kite. It's important, especially if you're flying foils and inflatables. A lot of the foils have 5 lines, and most of the inflatables have 4 lines. So it's always important to make sure you've got bars and lines to suit your kite. Pumps and hose attachments. Now, not everybody needs to bring a pump, but it's important to make sure that we all have the valves that we need for our kites. So no matter what, you should always bring your valves with you. Occasionally someone's turned up with they've got a Nash kite, and those Nash kites have the funny end, and nobody else had a Nash kite, and we struggled to pump up their kites. So bring your own valve attachments, even if you don't bring your own pump. Harnesses. Most of us use waist harnesses. Some people use seat harnesses when we're kiting on the water. But for snow kiting, you can also use a climbing harness, which is really, really interesting. Climbing harnesses are going to work great unless you have back issues. And that's the only time I'd say, hey, don't use a climbing harness, because you want to have something that's got some good back support. I've got I don't know if you guys can see that with my weird background. That is an ozone snow kiting harness, and you can see how it's got really nice lumbar and back support there. And then it all attaches at the front with carabiners and stuff there. So you can use the same harness that you use on water, but make sure that it's going to fit over your ski gear. If you've got one of those ride engine harnesses that are, you know, nice and streamlined, and maybe you bought the size that just fits over your bikini or your thin wetsuit, they may not fit over all of the layers in your ski jacket and everything. So check that your harness is going to fit over the top. Don't stress if it's not. I'm going to have about half a dozen spare harnesses with me, and you're very welcome to try a specific snow kiting harness over the weekend. The benefit of a specific snow kiting harness is it has leg loops to hold the harness down, similar to a seat harness, but without the seat. You can see in the picture above me, it looks very much like a climbing harness with back support, but with leg loops, and that holds the harness down. As many of you know, when we're kiting, if our harness is right up, 1, it hurts your boobs. 2, you don't have as much throw in your arms, so you don't have quite the amount of control and D-power in your kite. So having your harness stay down can be an advantage, and having those leg loops to hold it down just makes it easy, so it's not sliding over all of your slippery ski gear. Line extensions and pigtails. I don't know whether you guys are aware of these. There's a picture over there on the side of the screen. Pigtails, little pieces of line that have knots and loops, and they are fantastic if we are going to be sharing gear. So if I'm going to use an ozone bar and lines on a Cabrina kite, I might need to use those pigtails to turn knots to loops and loops to knots so that I can attach my kite and gear. I'm also going to use pigtails if, let's just say, somebody's lines are not even. You do a lot of kiting, and I hope you do, and sometimes our middle lines on our bar are going to stretch because the kite hangs off them. And so sometimes if your lines are uneven, we can again use those pigtails to even up our lines. And the other time I use pigtails is, I mentioned before, in high winds, we can actually halve our lines. So if you've got a bar and lines with, say, 20-meter lines on them, we can use the pigtails to halve our lines and turn our 20 meters into 10 meters, which then reduces the power in our kite. Now, this is a handy tip and trick for you if you're on a kite holiday and maybe it's higher wind than it was supposed to be and your kite's too big. We can reduce the power in it. So pigtails is an amazing thing, and I've got a bunch of spare ones with me, so don't stress if you don't have those. And the other thing is line extensions. Now, line extensions is a fantastic trick, because if you bring some extensions with you on a kite trip, it extends the range of your kite. So most extensions are about 5 meters long. So if you had 20-meter lines and you added 5-meter extensions, you've now got 25-meter lines. So that's going to give you a bigger wind window, give you more room for whipping your kite around, and create more power in your kite. I know I went on a kite trip in Alaska last year, and the wind was so light we weren't even sure we were going to be able to kite. And Tom, one of my friends, said, "Hey, Jen, you got a spare bar and lines with you?" I said, "Of course I do. I always carry a spare. And if you've got one, fantastic." And I actually took my 20-meter lines off one bar and added it to the other, and I was out there kiting with 45-meter lines, and we had a fantastic session that day in about 3 or 4 knots. It was amazing. So line extensions and pigtails, and I'll have some of those at the camp you guys can play with or use. Kite safety leash, don't forget your leash. Having a spare carabiner and rope for anchoring or towing is handy. That's a great thing just to have as a spare in your backpack, just in case chicken loops break, you need to attach an anchor to a post for some reason. It's just a handy thing to have. And then having a repair kit for your kite. If you're flying an inflatable, having some bladder repair, maybe having some sticky ripstop in case you rip your kite. These are all things that are going to get you out of trouble if you're on a kite holiday and something goes wrong with your kite. So my last slide here is just a bit of extra info for you to help make some decisions, and also just to reinforce a couple of the important things that I talked about. One, be sure to see if your harness fits over your gear before your trip, and make sure that's going to work. I have seen people wear their harness just over their thermal underwear and then put their ski jacket over the top if their harness didn't fit over their jacket, and that can work, although then where does your chicken loop attach? It'd have to attach below your jacket. Or I remember about 15 years ago, we all used to cut holes in our ski jackets, do a little buttonhole so that we could poke our hook through. We all thought we were so cool. Now, snow kiting is difficult for body temperature control, as I mentioned, so having some venting is a great idea. And as I mentioned, having that puffy down jacket to wear over a shell is a great idea. Maybe you've got a brother or a husband or somebody you can borrow one of their men's large puffies to bring with you to put over everything. It can just be super handy, and that's going to keep you nice and warm. And as I mentioned, one of the best tips is those glove liners to avoid bare hands during line setup. Choosing the right backpack is key for when you're carrying a heavy load. Waist and chest straps are essential in my books. Backpacks that come with kite are not always suitable to carry snowboards. But for our women's weekend, as I mentioned, most of our kiting is going to be close to the road. So you're just going to need a backpack to carry, you know, your kite gear and maybe snacks and some water and that sort of thing. Maybe a 5-10 minute walk from the car to have your gear so you don't have to walk back to the car every time you need something. And I mentioned, you know, anchoring your kite is essential with inflatables to make sure it doesn't blow away. So having an avalanche shovel is the best method for anchoring a kite. I'm going to talk tomorrow night a little bit more about anchoring your kites and, you know, other things that you can use, like if you were on a frozen lake, for instance, and it was ice and it only had an inch or two of fresh snow on top, the shovel's not going to work. All of my friends who snow kite on the frozen lakes will use an ice screw to screw into the ice, put a carabiner on it in order to have an anchor for their kite. So that's just something to think about there. So that's pretty much everything on the list. I know it's a lot. I told you it's going to be an extensive list. You don't need everything, but hopefully I've given you a reminder of something you maybe hadn't thought of, or something that you might need to borrow or rent in order to make sure you are comfortable. I'm going to have a Q&A session at the end, but I've got a fun little video to share with you. Right here that I filmed last year when I was packing for Alaska. Now a lot of the time when I've got people for kite lessons, they say to me, they say, you know, oh Jen, I can only fit, I'm flying on a plane, I can only, you know, bring 1 or 2 kites with me. And it's possible to bring more kites than that. I'm about to show you packing for Alaska where I took 26 kites with me. So let's play this video and I'll talk you through it. It's going in fast forward. So I'm using my old ski socks that got holes in them to put over my skis, and I'm putting them in a big snowboard bag there at the back rather than a skinny ski bag. I'm putting my harnesses on the tips and the tails to protect my gear. Got my bar in there. I've got my backpack with all my safety gear in, and I've thrown my other backpack in there with a kite, plus a spare harness. Now I'm starting to get my kites ready. I don't need these backpacks. If I'm going to bring 4 or 5 kites with me, there's no point having 4 or 5 backpacks. They just weigh a ton. So can any backpacks that you don't need and just have one good pack that you'll use. You can see this is the way that I pack up my kite. I fold my kite in half, and then I kind of do a half fold roll up to the center of the kite. Always making sure that I do the valve up and put the neoprene over the top so I don't damage my kite. And then I pack my kite into thirds. Thanks to my mum learnt to sew. She made me some nice little stuff sacks, thanks Mum, out of some ripstop. You can just buy cheapies from Walmart, but having a lightweight stuff sack instead of those heavy backpacks is going to be a fantastic idea. So this is my 12 meter Ozone Rio. So this is my biggest inflatable kite I'm going to travel with. So this is the one that's the biggest, the most weight. And I'm going to fold it up like I did the other one. And if I fold it into thirds like that, it's quite a big parcel. You know, I want to put it in that bag, but it just doesn't fit like that. So long ago, they used to make the stuff sacks that extend out, and I made sure I kept one of my old best ones for this purpose, so that you can actually put your kite in a stuff sack in a long tube-like position, and that's going to make it much easier to fit into that snowboard bag. Now that's the same bag that I use for putting my surfboards, foil boards in. But the bag that I'm packing right now is a Bauer bag. Now this is a bag designed for ice hockey. Ice hockey players have the best bags. That bag cost me $100. It's super lightweight. It's got wheels and a handle. You want to make sure that you're not using luggage that weighs so much you're spending all your weight on the bag and not what's going in it. So I've packed that bag up and I'm getting that at 50 pounds. I'm about to weigh the other bag here and get those at 50 pounds. If you can have them right at that 50 pound level, then you don't get into trouble. having a bit of a dance. Anybody who works with Sensi knows you've got to dance when you're doing everything. It's way more fun. And so now I'm packing all my gear. I've got my ski boots there. I'm going to put my beacons, my cameras, anything fragile inside my ski boots. I'm going to pack all of my, you know, undies and stuff in stuff sacks and put in there. I've got my knee pads and all of my gear, my Ugg boots. Everything starts going into the bag there. My spare gloves, spare t-shirts, all of my clothing, dancing gear, puffies, lots of puffy jackets, my favorite hats. Oh, there's my Sensi bikini, of course, goes in there. Now I'm getting my helmet ready. Spend the time to put your goggles in the goggle case so they don't get scratched. Put them inside your helmet. There's my favorite polar bear hoodie and cap. So I've got everything I need in that bag. And this was the amount of luggage that I took to Alaska last year. So you can see I've got 4 checked-in bags and 2 hand luggage ready to go. You don't need to bring that much stuff. That's me taking all of my own kite gear plus all of the kites I need for my school quiver. And you should be able to fit everything in 2 bags. So I was exhausted after doing all of that. And that was my little packing video for you.